Hello everyone, welcome back again to this live section. Thank you so much for being with me. So guys, I want you guys to actually leave whatever you're doing and actually come and listen to what I'm about to tell you guys right now. This is going to actually shock you people. Now, as you can see on the screen, the Chief of Defense Staff has proposed the creation of ranks nationwide to end open grazing. This is now official government policy. But do you know who said this first? Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said it first and they called it what? Treason. Now, the Chief of Defense Staff, Musa, is now coming out to tell us that they need to propose the creation of ranks nationwide to end what? Open grazing. This is now official government what? Policy. And guess what? Everybody was we are now surprised. Now let's go back to 2021. Nnamdi Kanu issued a 14-day ultimatum in all the 37 state governors in Nigeria. He demanded a total ban on open grazing. He referenced the 1969 statutory law which prohibits it, calling open grazing a provocative and what primitive practice. He praised Southwest governors for their ban at the time and urged Southeast leaders to act. Now, 1969 laws bans open grazing, enforce it now, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said in 2021. That was the number one thing they held against him. That was the crime they used to arrest him. Now, what is going on now? Let's take a look at what Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said. He said a 14-day ultimatum to Southeast governors in January 2021. Nnamdi Kanu issued a 14-day ultimatum to the governors of Nigerian Southeast states, urging them to ban all forms of open grazing in the region. He referenced a 1969 statutory law that he claimed prohibits open grazing, describing the practice as was prerogative and primitive. Kanu argued that this law should be enforced to address the conflict between farmers and herders, practically those who attributed to Fulani herdsmen. He condemned the Southwest governors for their recent ban on open grazing and called for similar actions in the Southeast. Now, because of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was the first person to say this such a thing, and when Mazi Nnamdi Kanu talked about it, you know what they called him? They said it was treason. That why is he going to order for order to end what open grazing? Now, today on our screen, the Chief of Defense Staff has now proposed the creation of ranks nationwide to end open grazing. This is now official government what policy. Now, in 1969 law, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said that 1969 law bans open grazing. Then he now went on further to say that they should enforce it. That's what Mazi Nnamdi Kanu told us in 2021. That was the number one thing they held him against. That was the crime they used to arrest him because he talked about ending what open grazing in Nigeria. Now, in February 2021, Kanu tweeted that open grazing is not just illegal but deadly. He said this illegal practice kills innocent people and destroy what communities. These were the words they said incited violence. But today, the Chief of Defense is saying the same thing. So tell me, what is the offense here? The fact that the Chief of Defense is now coming out to tell us the same thing as Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said in 2021 that made them to even arrest him and keep him in custody detention to today. Why is the Chief of Defense Staff not saying what Mazi Nnamdi Kanu told us on February 2021? Where is his offense now? What should we say that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu committed, since the Chief of Defense is not saying exactly what the same thing? Now, let's addressing Justice James Omotosho. Justice James Omotosho, if calling for the enforcement of a law and defending your people is not incitement, then the Chief of Defense should be beside Kanu in DSS custody because he is repeating the same statement. Nnamdi Kanu did not incite. He rose for his people when the government refused to act and instead backed those causing what? The bloodshed. Vindication. This is why we say his intention is what? Political. The very demands they used to demonize him are now being repackaged as government policy. They are proving that his only crime was speaking the truth they wanted to silence. Now that Tinubu's government has indirectly admitted Kanu was right all along, should this not secure his immediate release? I want you guys to drop your thoughts in the comment section, and please don't forget to share this video, share this live session, and the world needs to see the hypocrisy in the Nigerian government. So please guys, don't forget to share this live session. The world needs to see that the hypocrisy in the federal government. How can they come out and tell us that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is in DSS custody today because he talked about ending open grazing, and now today the Chief of Defense Staff Musa is coming out to say that they should end what open grazing in Nigeria? Like, imagine that. Imagine that this is something that they are saying that, oh, of what and say he was a terrorist. Now, this is what Martin Namdekalu went on further to tell them. He says condemnation of open grazing as illegal and deadly. This is what he told us in February 2021. In a tweet on February 3rd, 2021, Kanu condemned open grazing as an illegal practice that kills people. What he emphasized. Now, let's link it to the 1969 law. Emphasize that Nnamdi Kanu did not just speak emotionally, he cited a legal foundation. Kanu wasn't just making noise, he referenced a 1969 century law that bans open grazing. That means what he was saying was rebellion. It was demanding enforcement of existing law. How can enforcing the law be a crime? Connect to current crisis shows that what Kanu warned about is now happening. Plateau State massacre, Benue land takeovers, farmers abandoning lands due to fear of herders. Everything he warned about in 2021 is now reality. The Benue crisis, Plateau attack, and farmers were fleeing. It's all exactly what he was predicted. Now let's expose the hypocrisy. Highlighting that the same government that ignored him is now adopting his words. When Kanu said it, they called it hate speech. When the chief of defense said it, they called it policy. Why? Because they feared his voice but respect what the militaries. Let's tie it to his arrest. Stress that open grazing was one of the main grounds used to justify adopting him. Remember the DSS Duza accused him of inciting violence because of his anti-open grazing wars campaign. Today, that same campaign is official government direction. So why is he still behind bars? If the Nigerian government are not using that's his same idea, that's the same direction, why is Mazi Nnamdi Kanu still in bars? Don't you think the chief of defense staff should go and join him in the DSS custody? Now, let's address self-defense. Point out that Kanu never called for attacks, only for communities to defend themselves. When the federal government refused to protect its people, Kanu said they had a right to self-defense. That's not terrorism, that's what survival. Northern politics, and add that Buhari's government rejected the ban because it protected what Fulani interest. The Buhari regime ignored Kanu's warning because it would expose their Fulani brothers' atrocities. Today, the same North is crying because the fire they nurtured is spreading beyond the southeast. Let's call out James Omotosho. Strengthening the appeal to the judge, Justice Omotosho, the same words you used as evidence against Kanu are now national word policy. Are you going to jail the chief of defense too? Now, if the government is now quoting Kanu, should they not apologize and free him immediately? I want you guys to drop your answers in the comment section. If the government is not quoting Kanu, if the government is not doing what Martin Nnamdi Kanu said a long time ago, don't you think they should apologize and release him in this case? Don't you think they should actually apologize and release him, since they're not using his same direction he's using, since they're not talking about what he talked about in 2021, which they called it a terrorism act? Now today the federal government is not using it, they're not bringing it up. Now, international law angle. Let's link Kanu's stance to international human rights. Under international law, indigenous communities have the right to protect their land and culture from invasion. Kanu's call to ban open grazing aligns with UN declaration on indigenous rights. That means the Nigerian government is criminalizing what the UN sees as a right. That is it. For the fact that in other international law, indigenous communities have the right, to protect their land and culture from invasion. Kanu's call to ban open grazing aligns with UN declarations on indigenous rights. That means the Nigerian government is criminalizing what the UN sees as a right. And for the fact that these people are criminalizing what the UN sees as a right, that means the federal government are in big trouble. Yes, for criminalizing what the UN sees as a right. And the federal government is saying that Martin Nnamdi Kanu is wrong by trying to say that they should end open grazing in Nigeria. Now let's expose the government's fears. Stress why they are holding him despite admitting he was right. They know if Kanu is released now, he will be seen as a prophet whose warnings came true. That will expose the government lies and threaten the Biafra movement. That's why they are afraid to let him out, even when they are copying his policies. Now let's compare Kanu to other leaders punished for truth. Let's compare it. Let's compare Martin Nnamdi Kanu to other leaders punished for truth. History repeats itself. Nelson Mandela was jailed for defending his people, and then the same South African government later adopted his ideas. Kanu is walking that same path. Now, You guys know that Nelson Mandela was jailed, right? Yes, Nelson Mandela was jailed for for defending his people. Now, the same South African government later adopted what Nelson Mandela's idea. That same thing now that is going on going on about Nelson Mandela is the same thing that Kanu is working the same parts now. Now, economic impact. Tie open grazing to Nigeria's food crisis. Because the government refused to listen to Kanu, farmers abandoned their lands. Today, Nigeria is facing what? Food inflation and scarcity. His warnings wasn't just about security, it was about what? Survival. Now let's call out the DSS narrative. Let's break the incitement what accusation. The DSS claims Kanu incited violence, but their own chief of defense is now repeating the exact same words. Are you going to call the chief of defense a terrorist too? Or are you going to also say he's inciting what? Violence? Because exactly the same thing Martin Mikalu said in 2021, that's what the chief of defense staff is saying today. Now, appeal to the Southeast governors. Put pressure on leaders. Kanu begged Southeast governors in 2021 to enforce the anti-grazing law. They refused. Now that the chief of defense is saying the same thing, would they finally listen to him? Or are they only brave when it's about oppressing their own people? Now, it's not just about releasing Kanu. The Nigerian government owes him and the Southeast a public apology for criminalizing what? The truth and letting thousands die before admitting he was right. Shows. Now, let's tie it to Tinubu. This shows how Tinubu's silence plays into it. Tinubu is quietly what? Letting the military admit Kanu was right without saying it himself, because he doesn't want to anger the Northern cabal. You guys know the people I call the Northern cabal. The Northern cabals are all these Fulani people. Yes, these Northern leaders, they are the Northern what cabals. But whether they like it or not, this is a full word vindication. Tinubu doesn't want to, say that, oh, Mazen Kanu was right all along. So he is admitting that Kanu, he was admitting, he was allowing the military to admit that Kanu was right because he doesn't want to anger the Northern cabal. But whether they like it or not, this is a full vindication that's what Mazen Kanu was right all along. So guys, let's move on. Let's link it to national unity. If the government had listened to Kanu in 2021, thousands of lives could have been saved and Nigeria would be more united. Instead, they ignored him and were deepening the division. If the same government is now enforcing the very policy Kanu demanded, it means his arrest was not about crime. It was about what? Silencing him. That makes his continued detention illegal and what? Unconstitutional. Now, Kanu won. If you don't ban open grazing, Fulani herdsmen will invade your lands, kill your children, and take over your farms. Look at Benue today. Look at Plateau. Look at Ondo. It's all happening exactly as he said. Now, when a Fulani elder says the same thing, they call it policy. When a Fulani elder says the same thing, they call it his policy. When Kanu said it, they called it terrorism. That's not justice. That's ethnic politics. Open grazing isn't just a security issue, it's an economic disaster. Kanu understood that the primitive system destroys crops, reduces food production, and creates poverty. That's why he demanded modern ranking. Now, if condemning open grazing is evidence of terrorism, then the chief of defense staff is now the #1 terrorist in Nigeria. Will DSS go and arrest him too? This whole drama proves what we've been saying. Kanu's arrest was orchestrated by the Northern cabal to protect their Fulani agenda. Now that the same policy is being adopted, the hypocrisy is what is being exposed. That 2021 ultimatum shows Kanu was acting like a true leader. He didn't just talk, he gave governors a deadline and cited the law. That is governance and not what? Crime. Every Nigerian should be outraged. They jailed a man for saying the truth, and now they are repeating his words as if they are invented in it. That is injustice of the highest order. That is why the world must pay attention. Nigeria cannot keep a political prisoner for demanding what is now officially world policy. Amnesty International, the UN, and ECOWAS must act now. If Kanu's words are now government policy, there is no case to answer. He should work free today, not tomorrow, not even next week. Kanu should what? He should what? Work free today. If they are not trying to implement his policy, he should actually work free today. Now, Kanu's message was about peace and not war. People forget that Kanu's campaign against open grazing was actually a call for peace. He wanted to stop farmer header clashes and still save lives. He wasn't promoting violence. He was trying to what? End it. If the government had acted on his ultimatum in 2021, thousands of Nigerians massacred by herdsmen between 2021 and 2025 would still be alive. Their blood is on the hands of those who ignored him. Kanu, it proves he was fighting for all Nigerians. Yes, Kanu did not limit his call to the southeast. His ultimatum was to all 37 states. That proved he wasn't fighting only for Igbos, he was fighting for every Nigerian farmer and community under threat. Let's contrast between Buhari and Tinubu era. Under Buhari, they protected open grazing because it served the Fulani agenda. Under Tinubu, they are quietly was admitting it was wrong, but instead of freeing the man who first demanded the change, they are still keeping him locked up. Now let's show the pattern of criminalizing truth. First, they ignore you, then they fight you, then they jail you, and finally they admit you are right. Kanu is at the last stage. They are admitting he was right while keeping him in chains. Now let's expose the political motive. His arrest was never about law and order. It was a political calculation to silence the loudest voice, calling out the Fulani agenda and defending the indigenous land. Question the judiciary independence. If Justice Omotosho continues to hold Kanu despite this clear vindication, then we have to ask, is the judiciary free or is it just an extension of the executive political game? Let's connect to national security. By ignoring Kanu's warning, the government allowed open grazing to become a national security threat. Banditry, kidnappings, and food insecurity all trace back to this single policy failure. Young people need to see the lesson here. Speaking the truth in Nigeria can get you jailed, but it also plants a seed that cannot be erased. Kanu's voice has outlived their propaganda. Instead of keeping him in DSS custody, why not sit down with him and craft a national solution to farmer header crisis? His ideas are already shaping policy. Imagine what a dialogue could achieve. What moral ground does Nigeria stand on when it jails a man for demanding safety for his own people? Like, what moral ground do they really stand for? Do they really stand up when he jails a man for demanding safety for his people and then steals his idea as policy? This is moral bankruptcy. Let's link it to Biafra agitation. This vindication shows why the Biafra agitation grew, because the Nigerian state refuses to protect its people and punishes anyone who tried. The government must explain to Nigerians why the chief of defense can say the same thing and be praised. Why Kanu says it and is branded a terrorist? We demand answers. They need to tell us why they are praising the chief of defense staff for saying what Martin Namdekali said in 2021 and he was considered a terrorist. Now that the chief of defense staff is not saying it now, why are they praising him and why are they rejoicing over what he said? Now, let's tie it to the constitution. Section 14 Chapter 2B of the Nigerian Constitution says the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Kanu's demand to ban open grazing was enforcing his constitutional duty. How can enforcing the constitution be a crime? They tried to paint Kanu's anti-open grazing stance as anti-Fulani, but his ultimatum was for all 37 states, including the North. This shows he was protecting farmers everywhere, not targeting an ethnic group. When the government adopts the same policy they arrested you for demanding, that is an indirect word, and quintal. His continued detention is not just illegal, it's malicious. Thousands of farmers in Benue, Plateau, Enugu, and even parts of Kaduna have been crying for years for the exact thing Kanu said. His voice was an amplifier for the voiceless. That's leadership and not crime. Open grazing has destroyed over 3 trillion worth of crops and livestock since 2021. Kanu's ban wasn't just about safety, it's about saving Nigeria's economy. No developed country in the world still practices open grazing. From Kenya to South Africa to the US, they were all moved to ranking. Kanu was simply calling for Nigeria to catch up with modern civilization, because looking at what was happening, they were seeing it as Nigeria is still in the primitive age. Because tell me, why would they still be doing open grazing in this 2025? Like they're still doing open grazing in 2025. So Kanu was actually doing all these things, to tell Nigerians that we are not in a modern world. We're not in a modern world. We don't need to still be living in primitive age where they're still carrying cattle and be, going up and down. That is what Martin Namdekali was trying to do. So he was actually telling Nigerians to catch up with modern civilizations, just like the way South Africa, Kenya, and US are doing. Now, if the DSS must explain to us, if the DSS still claims his anti-open grazing statements are terrorism, they must now explain why the chief of defense staff is saying the same thing. Would they fight terrorism charges against him too? We demand a public hearing. There needs to be a public judicial hearing where this hypocrisy is laid bare. How can you jail a man for demanding that that has now become official government policy? You're jailing a man that demanded for ending open grazing. Now that same thing he demanded for is not is not officially what government policy, and you guys are what jailing him. We demand a judicial hearing, because the hypocrisy of the Nigerian government is becoming is becoming out of hand. Now, question northern silence. Notice how the northern earth are quiet now that the chief of defense is saying exactly what Kanu said. When it was Kanu, they screamed terrorism. The silence now is proof that his arrest was what political. Appealing to the people, this is not just about Kano, it's about the right of every Nigerian to speak the truth without fear of being adopted or jailed. If we let this stand, nobody is safe. Why is this admission coming now? Is it because the crisis has become uncontrollable? They ignored Kanu until reality forced them to copy his words. That shows he was always ahead of them in every case. This is the time to push this to the world stage. Amnesty International, the UN and EU, they all need to say that Nigeria jailed a man for a policy they are now enforcing. If Kanu's words are now government policy, it proves the Nigerian state lacks vision. They wait for a man to be jailed, then steal his idea. That is not just governance, that is what failure. Right now, Kanu has more moral authority than the entire Nigerian government combined. They are repeating his words while keeping him in chains. That makes him the true leader in this story. End with a direct challenge to Tinubu, to the DSS, to Justice Omotosho. If Nnamdi Kanu's anti-open grazing policy is now official government position, why is still in detention? Nigeria deserves an answer. We don't need an answer tomorrow. We need an answer today. If the Nigerian government is now enforcing Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's policy, why are they still keeping Mazi Nnamdi Kanu in continual detention? So guys, please, I want you guys please type in the comment section, free Mazi Nnamdi Kanu now. Justice delayed is not what justice denied, because this is a normal ritual that we do here in order to tell the federal government that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is innocent. And for the fact that you guys are not implementing the policy he made 2021 concerning ending open grazing. Now, why are you guys tagged it as being a treason because of that particular thing he said? Now that the chief of defense staff have come out to say the same thing as Nnamdi Kanu said, why don't you guys also put the chief of defense staff in what DSS custody? Now, open grazing was already illegal. Kanu wasn't inventing a law, he was asking the government to enforce an already existing ban on open grazing in several states. How does demanding the law be obeyed become terrorism? That is the question. I don't understand. How can a man that is saying that, okay, they should enforce this law? This is a law that has already been existing. I'm asking the Kalu saying, I want you us to enforce this law. How are they not saying that it's not a terrorism? So for the fact that we're not obeying law, has it become terrorism? Now let's link to let us link this to internet displaced people, that's IDPs. Because the government ignored Kano, thousands have been displaced by header attacks. IDP camps in Benue and Plateau are full of victims who would have been saved if one ultimatum was obeyed. Let's expose the media silence. When Kanu made the call, mainstream media downplayed it under pressure from the government. Now that the military is saying it, those same media houses are calling it policy direction. That's hypocrisy. Highlight double justice system. If a Fulani elder says it, it's wisdom. If Kanu says it, it's terrorism. This double standard is why Nigerians no longer trust the justice system. Let's tie it to food inflation. Nigeria's food inflation hitting over 40% is directly tied to open grazing crisis. Kanu saw this economic collapse coming and sounded the alarm. They jailed the messenger instead of fixing the problem. Contrast peaceful warning versus armed groups. Kanu's approach was a peaceful legal warning. Meanwhile, armed header militants roam free. The government jailed the man calling for peace and protecting those causing the war. Political solution versus justice. This entire scenario proves Kanu's case isn't a legal matter, it's political. If the government wanted justice, they would free him today, because his so-called crime is now what national policy. Now, if DSS claims his anti-open grazing stance incited violence, then they must arrest the chief of defense staff today. Otherwise, they must admit their case was built on Kanu's cause for ranking was not anti-Fulani, it was actually for their benefit too. Modern rankings protect headers from revenge attacks and give them stable income. The government chose conflict over solution. Now, linked to land grabbing, open grazing is not just about cattle, it's a tool for land grabbing. Kanu exposed this agenda, and that's why the northern allies moved to silence him. Kanu's call was nationalistic. He didn't just speak for the Southeast, he spoke for farmers in Taraba, for mothers in Plateau, for children in Benue. That is what a true nationalist does. Let's tie it to Tinubu's legacy. If Tinubu wants to prove he's different from Buhari, freeing Kanu now that his policy has been vindicated is the only way to show leadership. Emotional appeal. Imagine being jailed for warning your people about danger, and 4 years later, the same government admits you are right, but keeps you in chains. This is beyond injustice. It's what cruelty. Let's demand historical record correction. History must record that the man they called a terrorist was the one who saved Nigeria from even bigger farmer header war by forcing the debate on what? On ranking. Now, to the international community, if you care about human rights, here's your proof. Nigeria jailed a man for calling for a ban on open grazing. 4 years later, they are enforcing the same ban. Silence is no longer an option. To be honest, silence is no longer an option, and we need to do something right now. We need to do something about the fact that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's policy in 2021 has now been enforced in Nigeria, and now they are still keeping him in detention. They are still keeping him in DSS custody. Now let's link it to federal character. Kanu call highlighted the failure of federal character. The government refusal to act on open grazing showed it was prioritizing one ethnic group interest over national world security. Every single one in Kanu gave on open grazing, from Benue to Plateau to Ondo, has come to pass. You can't call that incitement. That is what foresight. And let's expose the real fear. They are not afraid of Kanu's word. They are afraid of his accuracy. Every time he speaks, reality proves him right. That is why they want his voice silenced at all costs. Let's tie it to the Biafra argument. This vindication is exactly why many Igbos say they need Biafra. If the Nigerian government can jail you for defending your people, while later admitting you are right, how can you trust such a system? Now, a government that copies the words of a man it calls a terrorist has no moral ground left. You can't jail a man for saying something, then turn around and enforce the same thing as policy. If DSS and the military are now aligned with Kanu's policy, was it intelligence failure or political malice that made them arrest him in the first place? Now, thousands of farmers abandoned their livelihoods because of open grazing. Kanu's warning was not just about lives, it was about protecting Nigeria's food chain and economy. When Kanu raised the alarm, Buhari kept quiet and backed open grazing. Today, even the military under Tinubu can't keep quiet anymore. That's how serious the crisis has become. If the government is not using Kanu's exact policy, they must officially declare and that his stance was right and apologize to him and the entire Southeast publicly. Now, detaining a man for demanding protection for his people when implementing his idea violates every human rights charter Nigeria has signed, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Remember, Kanu was abducted from Kenya partially because of this statement on open grazing. That means the Nigerian government orchestrated an international operation to silence a voice now proving right. Let's call out injustice by example. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. had been jailed for demanding civil rights, and 5 years later, the US government adopted his exact policy while keeping him locked up. That is the level of injustice we are seeing here in Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Now, if the government now agrees with Kanu, it's time for a national dialogue on open grazing and farmer-herder relations with him at the table. Keeping him locked up is holding Nigeria back. Tinubu cannot claim to be a reformer while holding a man whose policy he is now enforcing. This is the moment for him to show leadership and Kanu's release. Now think about this. A man spoke up to save his people from death. For that, he was chained, tortured, and silenced. 4 years later, they admit he was right, but they still won't set him free. What does that say about justice in Nigeria? Just tell me, what does that really say about justice in Nigeria? Now, let's compare to regional laws. Even northern states like Benue, under Otom, and parts of Taraba had passed anti-open grazing laws. Kanu was simply saying what some governors had already recognized, while he was singled out and criminalized for it. The fact that the chief of defense is now adopting Kanu's word shows the military admits they failed to address the crisis until it got out of control. At the core, Kanu's call was about land rights. Open grazing without consent is a violation of land ownership and indigenous autonomy. He was defending a constitutional right. Tens of thousands of children are growing up in IDP camps because open grazing turned their homes into war zones. Kanu's word could have prevented their suffering.
This entire saga shows you can change a man, but you cannot what change the truth. Kanu's words are now national policy, even as he sits in detention. That is what the power of truth. Why are those who are actually committing header attacks roaming free, while the man who warned about it rots in DSS custody? This is selective justice at its worst. Years from now, history will look back at this and call it a national shame that Nigerian jailed a man for saying the exact thing they will later copy as policy. When Kanu opened grazing primitive, he was not insulting a tribe. He was pointing out to the outdated nature of moving cattle through farmer lands in a modern economy. Ranking is progress, open grazing is a regression. Now, let's appeal to farmers association. Farmers across Nigeria should be speaking up. The man who defended your lands and food security is still in chains while his policy is being implemented. Where are your voices? You need to speak up now. Let's connect it to state failure. A country that calls for self-defense terrorism while refusing to defend its citizens is a failed state. That's what Kanu was exposing. Let's point out the global irony. In countries like Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa, banning open grazing is celebrated as modern policy. In Nigeria, demanding the same thing gets you a branded what? A terrorist. They just brand you as a terrorist if you're demanding the same thing that Kenya and South Africa are demanded. Kenya and South Africa demanded that they should ban open grazing. In fact, they should ban open grazing. Open grazing is even celebrated as a modern policy in Kenya and South Africa. But in Nigeria, when you demand such a thing, they will tell you that they will just brand you as a terrorist immediately. Imagine that. If Kanu was a northern activist saying the exact same thing, he would be in DSS custody today. Does it mean that if Kanu was a northerner, I don't even think that if Mazin Nantikali was a northerner and he was saying such a thing about, banning open grazing, I'm not sure that Mazin Nantikali would be in DSS custody today. No, they might actually try to release him. Now, this proves the case against him was built on ethnic politics and not justice. Sure, he was ahead of policymaker. Kanu was 4 years ahead of Nigerian so-called policymaker. They laughed at him then. Now they are quoting him word for word. That's what vision looks like. Use it as a call to action. Every Nigerian should demand Kanu's immediate release. If you keep quiet now, you are endorsing a system that can jail anyone for speaking the truth. Now, no matter what they do, history has already written the verdict. Nnamdi Kanu was right, the government was wrong, and his continued detention is one of the darkest stains on Nigeria's justice system. Just like I always tell you guys, please, this is actually a ritual that we do here because this is actually a platform that tries to agitate for the release of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Please, I want you guys to type on the comment section, free Mazi Nnamdi Kanu now, and also justice delayed is not justice denied. So guys, please type it on the comment section so the federal government will be aware that we are agitating for the release of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu because this is just a platform we use, to agitate for his release. Now, the ECOWAS country has ruled multiple times on the right to free speech and indigenous protection. Kanu's case is a perfect example where Nigeria is violating regional legal standard. Let's tie it to federalism failure. Kanu's ultimatum exposed the weakness of Nigeria's federalism. Governors who wanted to act were overruled by federal inaction, proving states have little real autonomy to protect their people. Now, let's connect it to Amnesty International report. Amnesty International has documented other former killings for years. Kanu was amplifying the same data Amnesty used, yet they called his voice terrorism. Use the if it was American angle. If an American activist demanded a policy that later became US law, they will be celebrated. In Nigeria, you get adopted and jailed. That's the difference between nations that value truth and those that fear it. Tied to food security, open grazing isn't just a security issue, it's a food security crisis. Kanu understood that feeding a nation starts with protecting farmland. That's leadership thinking far beyond tribal line. Now let's compare it to Kenya and Rwanda. Kenya banned open grazing in several regions years ago. Rwanda moved to ranking to prevent land conflicts. Nigeria is 4 years late, and Kanu paid the price for saying what other African nations already knew. And they Kukuma tagged him as a terrorist. Because if you take a look at it, Kenya they already banned open grazing in several regions years ago. The same thing goes with Rwanda. Rwanda has come out to ban open grazing even in their own country. Now, why is Nigeria always different? Because we are trying to ban open grazing, that's saying that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is a terrorist. Now, future generations will read about this case and ask, how did a government jail a man for saying exactly what they later enforced as a policy? I keep asking myself, you see all these things that they are doing to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, they're going to still document it as a history book. They're going to document it. And when the future generations are going to be reading about Mazen Namdekalu's case, they're going to be asking this question: how did the government jail a man for saying exactly what they later enforced as a policy? That will be the questions that many of them are going to be asking in the nearest future. Now, let's turn it into a leadership test. Tinubu is at a crossroad. He can either repeat Buhari's mistake and let injustice continue, or he can correct history and free the man whose words are now what government policy. Let's appeal to the northern farmers. Northern farmers have also been victims of what open grazing clashes. Kanu's policy protects them too. His fight was never against ordinary northerners. It was against a system that protects what violence. Now let's question the DSS narrative again. Let's question this DSS narrative again. If condemning open grazing equals what terrorism, then every Nigeria governor who signed anti-grazing bills should also be in DSS custody. Why is Kanu treated differently? Now, ranking policies bring order and reduces what ethnic conflict. Kanu's stance was actually a call for harmony and not what division. The government twisted it into hate speech. That is just it. Keeping a man in jail for telling the truth is not just illegal, it is immoral. Nigeria is fighting against its own consciousness. In this case, young Nigerians must learn these lessons. When you speak truth to power, they will fight you before they admit you are right. Kanu's case is the blueprint of that struggle. Every revolutionary voice in history, Mandela, Gadihi, even Awolowo, was once branded a criminal. Today, Nigeria is writing Kanu into the same book by proving him right while keeping him what changed. Because you know all these things that is going on, people will keep asking, why did they detain a man who they later used his policy after 4 years ago? Because that's what many people will be saying. You cannot detain a man that you're not using his policy. You can't. If you're using his policy, that means that what he said was true. So therefore, he should actually be released. Freeing Kanu after adopting his policy could be the first real step towards healing Nigerians' division. Keeping him locked up while using his ideas only what deepens the wound. Now, let's use the stolen voice angle. The government did not just jail Kanu, they stole his voice, they rebranded it as their own, and are now enforcing it as if that was their idea. That's intellectual and what political theft. Call out selective memory. Nigerians must not forget. In 2021, they said this anti-open grazing campaign was hate speech. Now they call it national security policy. Don't let them rewrite history. Tie it to Justice Omotosho's reputation. Every day, Kanu stays in detention while this policy is being enforced. Stains Justice Omotosho's name in legal history. Will you choose truth or politics? Now, let's use economic projection. Experts say ranking could save Nigerian billions in food imports. Kanu was ahead of the curve, seeing the economic impact of open grazing before the government even discussed it. Now, let's link to kidnapping crisis. Many kidnapping routes are tied to open grazing corridors. Kanu's warning wasn't just about farmers, it was about stopping the kidnapping industry before it was exploded. Tied to 1969 law more deeply. That 1969 statutory law Kanu cited proves he wasn't inventing a new rule. He was demanding Nigeria respect its own legislation. Ignoring him was ignoring the law itself. Now, for many communities, land is tied to culture. Kanu's fight to ban open grazing was also a fight to protect us cultural survival from forced displacement. Call it policy laundering. This is policy laundering. They arrest a man, steal his idea, rebrand it as a government initiative, and expect the world to clap. We see through the game. Linked to African liberation history, every African liberation movement has this chapter. The voice of truth is jailed, then years later, the oppressors use that same voice to govern. Kanu is leaving that chapter now. Emphasize the urgency. Every single day, Kanu remains in detention after this admission is another day Nigerian proves it values politics over justice. This can't wait for another court date. It has to end now. It has to end now because Mazi Nnamdi actually told them the truth. I'm not forcing you guys to implement a rule. I'm only saying do what the 1969 was. Do what the 1969 constitution is saying. Now, connected to national betrayal, jailing the man who tried to save Nigeria while copying his policy is not just what hypocrisy, it's betrayal of the nation itself. Now, ask the farmers in Benue, Plateau, Ebonyi, and Enugu. They will tell you Kanu's warning saved lives. His words were reality for them, not politics. Kanu wasn't speaking for himself. He was the voice of the thousands who couldn't reach Abuja. Silencing him was an entire people. Let's tie it to media integrity. Any media house reporting the chief of defense statement without mentioning Kanu is rewriting history and failing what? Journalism. Foreign investors in agriculture see open grazing as a risk. Kanu's call was not only non-national security, it was also an economic what? Invitation to modernize. If calling for ranking is incitement, then every agricultural reform in the world is a criminal. That shows how empty the DSS narrative is. Let's link it to rural poverty. Open grazing destroys farmland, pushes farmers into poverty, and creates food scarcity. Kanu's ban was also a fight against what? Rural poverty. That is it. So let's compare it to civil rights movement. In the US, Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed for speaking the truth. Later, his ideas became law. Nigeria is repeating that same story with Kanu. Demand historical credit. If the government is going to use his policy, they must publicly what? Credit Nnamdi Kanu for forcing the conversation. Anything else is theft of history. Even the Fulani herders would benefit from modern ranking. Kanu's demand was actually protecting them from what? Was actually preventing them from what? Retaliatory violence and poverty. It was never about hate. Now let's tie it to the national security architecture. The military admitting ranking is necessarily what? Is necessarily proves Nigeria's entire security. Architecture failed to listen to early warnings. Kanu was the early warning what system. Yes, this is the future generational lens. In 20 years, Nigerian children will read about this case and ask why was the man who saved thousands of lives treated as a criminal. This is the turning point. Either Nigeria frees Kanu and admits the truth, or it cements itself as a country where truth is punished and lies are rewarded. Now, expose the silence of politicians. Notice how many Southeast politicians are quiet now that Kanu has been vindicated. They fear the same system that jailed him, and that fear is why the regions would suffer. At what point does speaking the truth stop being a crime? If this case doesn't answer that question, Nigeria is not a democracy. That is it. Nigeria is not just what? A democracy. Now, linked to national dialogue failure, Kanu's call for banning open grazing was not a national dialogue starter. Instead of engaging him, they choose for detention. Now, the same dialogue is happening without him, proving their approach was wrong. Open grazing violates indigenous land rights. Kanu's demand aligns with the UN Declaration on the rights of indigenous people. Nigeria is punishing him for defending global human rights standards, highlighting legal irony. The same constitution they claimed he violated is the one that gives him the right to demand anti-open grazing laws for the safety of his people. That is the legal irony of his case. Now, billions have been spent on security operations against herder farmer clashes. If they had listened to Kanu, those billions could have gone into development instead of war. Because farmlands become war zones, thousands fled rural areas to cities, increasing unemployment and urban poverty. Kanu's solution was also an economic stabilizer. Every day Kanu spends in detention while his policy is enforced is proof that justice delayed is what justice denied. So guys, please type in the comment section, justice delayed is not what justice was denied. So let's frame it as national theft. Nigeria didn't just arrest Kanu, he stole his policy, his voice, and his credit, then branded him a criminal for the very thing they now promote. Let's compare with other activists. Environmental activists in the Niger Delta demanded protection of land and were criminalized. Now Kanu demanded protection of farmland and is in chains. Nigeria has a pattern of punishing defenders of land. Tie it to regional stability. Ignoring Kanu's warning destabilized not just Nigeria but West Africa. Cross-border herder crisis in Benue and Cameroon are now a regional security threat. Use the history will judge angle. History has a long memory. It will judge not just those who jailed Kanu, but also those who stayed silent while his truth was chained. Let's link it to human dignity. At its core, Kanu's fight was about human dignity, the right to live on your land without fear of invasion. Jailing him is an attack on that dignity. Make it about equality before the law. If the law is equal, then the chief of defense should face the same charges as Kanu. The fact that he won't prove this is political persecution, not justice. Highlights community autonomy. Communities have the right to decide what happens on their land. Kanu's anti-open grazing stance was a demand for community autonomy and was not rebellion. Now, use emotional imaginary. Picture Kanu is a DSS cell. Picture Kanu in a DSS cell while generals quote his exact words on TV. That image alone tells you everything about Nigerians' justice system. This is Nigeria's test. Can the country admit when it is wrong and free the man it silenced, or will it keep proving that truth is a crime here? Just like I told you guys, Martin Nnamdi is never even asking them to bring a new word. He's only saying implement this, implement the law that they said here, end open grazing. That was the law. Other states, other countries, has actually implemented it. Kenya, South Africa has implemented their own, saying stop open grazing activities. So why are these people's own? Why is Nigeria always so different? Why is their own always different? Now, the same law that Martin Nnamdi told them to implement, or sorry, to end open grazing in 2021. Now, the chief of defense staff is now coming out now in 2025 to say let them implement that policy. Imagine the same thing that Martin Nnamdi said, and they tagged him as what? They tagged him as a terrorist because of that particular word he said. Now, let's tie it to national trust crisis. Every day Kanu remains in detention. Why his idea becomes policy? Erodes what Nigerians' trust in the justice system, and the government was moral authority. Now let's link it to state level betrayal. South-East governors who refused to enforce anti-open grazing in 2021 shared the blame they failed to protect their people, then watched as Kanu was jailed for demanding it. Kanu is not in DSS custody because of violence. He is there because he said a truth so uncomfortable it shook the foundation of what? Power. If the government wants national unity, freeing the man whose warning is now saving lives would be the most powerful symbol of what? Reconciliation. Now, in 2021, they called it terrorism. In 2025, they call it policy reform. I don't just get. In 2021, they said, "Oh, this man is a terrorist because he was saying that they should end open grazing." Now, in 2025, they're calling it what? Policy reform. This double narrative is the clearest proof that his case is political and not what? Legal. Every farmer killed between 2021 is now a reminder that if they had listened to Kanu, thousands of lives would have been saved. Let's connect it to resource control. Open grazing is not just about cattle, it's about who controls land and resources. Kanu was defending indigenous control over their own resources. What message does it send to the world when Nigerian jails a man for demanding the same policy they are now adopting? It paints the country as a place where truth is what? Criminal. If this case sets a precedent, it means anyone who speaks truth to power can be jailed today and vindicated years later. That's a dangerous path for Nigerian democracy. In every faith, truth is scared. Punishing a man for truth and then copying his word invites a moral and what? Spiritual judgment beyond what? Politics. Kanu's detention violates what? Multiple international human rights treaties Nigeria signed. The UN can no longer ignore this when the government is now quoting what? His policy. They claim detaining him was for national security, but ignoring his policy created more insecurity. Now they admit his solution was the answer all along. Now, from Brazil to India, indigenous leaders fight to protect land and are branded rebels. Kanu's case is part of a global pattern where land defenders are what? Criminalized. Freeing Kanu now tells future generations Nigeria can correct its mistake. Keeping him locked up tells them the country would rather protect pride than what? Than justice. If Nnamdi Kanu was wrong, why is the chief of defense saying the exact same thing today? And if he was right, why is he still in chains? That is the same thing. If Master Nnamdi Kanu is wrong, now that means the chief of defense staff who just said the same thing that Master Nnamdi Kanu said should also be in DS custody. Then if Master Nnamdi Kanu is right and the chief of defense staff said the same thing in 2025, why is Master Nnamdi Kanu still in custody? Why is he not released if they are saying that, oh, finally they are not admitting that what Martin Nnamdi Kanu said in 2021 is right? Now, shows it's a case of criminalizing what? Solutions. Nigeria has a pattern of punishing those who bring solution. Kanu's anti-open grazing call is proof. Instead of fixing the crisis, they jail the man offering what? The answer. Let's map it out. 2021, Kanu issues was ultimatum. 2021, he was adopted. 2022 to 2024, crisis worsened. Now 2025, government repeats his exact words. That timeline itself exposes what? Injustice. Now every life lost between 2021 and 2025 because they refuse his warnings is on the government hand. His detention is not just illegal, it is soaked in the blood of what? Innocent farmers. Now, let's connect to climate change. Open grazing worsens desertification and climate migration. Kanu's call for ranking was also an environmental solution Nigeria was ignored. Internationally, this makes Nigeria look like a nation that fights its visionaries and celebrates them only after destroying their lives.
Real leadership listens to hard truth early. Jailing Kanu showed Nigeria prefers silence over solution until it's too late. Anti-open grazing policies are not new. In the 1960s, several regions had them. Kanu was asking Nigerians to return to its own historical wisdom. Experts estimate proper ranking could add billions to Nigerians' GDP through dairy and meat processing. Kanu saw economic opportunity where the government saw politics. Now, Nelson Mandela was jailed. Let's compare Mazi Nnamdi Kanu to other detained leaders. Nelson Mandela was jailed for demanding equality. Later, he was vindicated. Kanu is walking the same painful road of truth versus power. Now, let's turn it into a people's movement. This is no longer just about one man. It's about whether Nigerians will allow truth tellers to rot in chains while the government steals their word. They claimed jailing Kanu was to protect Nigerians' unity, yet ignoring his policy tore the country apart further. His intention did the opposition of what they claim. Now, Kanu warned specifically about Benin and Plateau. 4 years later, both are epicenters of crisis. His words were not incitement, they were prophecy. Just like someone said here, he said, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is my prophet. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is our prophet. Everything he said is actually what's coming to pass. Now, let's take a look at another comment here. Someone here said, Kenneth Chimese Uba said, Biafra is the only way for Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. I'm telling you guys the honest truth. Biafra is the only way. Oh. Biafra is the only way freedom for Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. It is just the only way. Now, someone, Danny Boy, said, is Nigeria even a country? Honestly, Nigeria is not a country, my brother. It is not a country. This fact is a lawless country. Even if it should be a country, it's a lawless country. A country that does not obey the rights of its citizens is not a country. Now, someone now said Jonathan Ibekwe released Nnamdi Kanu, and so okay, he said releasing Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Honestly, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu needs to be released, whether they like it or not. He needs to be released. He needs to be released. Okay, and someone said, God bless you, then bless you too, my brother. Because if you don't speak the truth, Nigeria is going to just be perishing day by day. Some people have decided not to be saying the truth. Just like I told you guys, this platform is here to agitate for the release of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. The Nigerian government needs to know that, oh, this man is innocent, as well as other people. AU and UN needs to know that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is innocent, and they need to release him right now. So guys, please drop your comment below based on what we are really talking about here, about the fact that the policy that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said in 2021 about ending open grazing, it is now what the Nigerian government are now implementing come 2025. They're now implementing it in 2025. Now, and that was the same policy that they said that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is a terrorist because of he said end open grazing. They kept him in DSS in custody, and also they abducted him. Now, in 2025, the Nigerian government are now implementing that particular policy. The chief of defense staff is not saying that they should end open grazing in Nigeria. So tell me now, is it not time for them to free him since they have found out that, oh, everything he said, the thing Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said is true? Is it not time for them to release him? So let's go on. Let me expose the fear of accountability. Releasing Kanu now would force the government to admit they were wrong. Keeping him detained is their way of hiding from accountability. Now, if Southeast leaders stay silent now that Kanu is vindicated, the history will remember their cowardness. This is just their moment to demand justice. Now, that is just it. Do you want to live in a country where speaking the truth is a crime until the government steals your word? If not, then this is the time to demand Kanu's release. This is the time for us to demand Kanu's release. We cannot stay in a country whereby you speak and the government will say, oh, what you said is a very bad thing. Oh, what you said, you've incited violence. So after some years, they will not be the one to implement that same thing that you said. Now, let's call it justice in reverse. Nigeria flipped justice upside down. The guilty walk free, while the man who demanded lawful policy is in chains. Yet let's use the if he was northerner angle. If a northerner activist had called for banning open grazing and later the policy was adopted, would he still be in DSS custody today? I don't think so. If Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was a northerner and he was the one that called for banning open grazing, I don't think he would be in custody today. Maybe not by now, he would have been released. So that question exposes the ethnic bias in this case. Now, globally, open grazing is being faced out of ranking because it's adopted
Kanu wasn't radical. He was aligning Nigeria with global best what practices. Now let's highlight the early warning system. Kanu functioned as Nigeria's early warning system. The government ignored the alarm, jailed the armed bell, and is now pretending they discovered the fire themselves. Now let's frame it as fear of the Southeast voice. This isn't just about Kanu, it's about silencing the Southeast. It's about silencing the Southeast voice in national policy. His vindication shows the region was right, demand was security. Now let's tie it to land ownership rights. Open grazing without consent violates private and communal land rights. Kanu's stance was not political, it was a legal defense of ownership enshrined in Nigerian law. Now let's show the global pattern. Around the world, indigenous leaders who fight for land protection face arrest. Kanu's case fits a global pattern of criminalizing what the land defenders. Now this is the question I want to ask: where is the DSS now? If they believed his words incited violence, why aren't they arresting the chief of defense who just said the same thing on national TV? Why are they not arresting the same chief of defense that said the same thing Martin Kelly said in national TV? That should be the question that we should be asking. So what is going on? Why are they not still doing the same thing? Now, cases like Kanu are why Nigerian democracy ranking is falling. You can't jail policy voices and claim to uphold what democratic values. Now, when Kanu called for self-defense, it was because the government failed to defend. The government failed to defend lives. This is a natural legal right recognized what nationwide. That 14-day ultimatum in 2021. That 14-day ultimatum in this is now what historically was is now historical. It marks the exact moment Nigerians chose to ignore a solution and create a crisis. Now let's picture this. The man who begged Nigerians to stop open grazing sits in a cold DSS cell while generals on TV quote his exact words to save face. That's the image of what injustice. I call it what injustice. It is a big injustice. The man who was begging Nigerians to stop open grazing is sitting in a cold DSS cell, like he is in continued detention for since 2021 to date. He has been in continued detention. Now, the same chief of the same staff came out on national TV and said that exact word that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu said, and nothing was done about it. They didn't even come and say that, oh, chief of defense staff is inciting violence. This is an image of what? Injustice. Now, this is bigger than Kanu. It's about whether Nigeria can face its own mistake and correct them, or if pride will keep destroying what? Justice. Now, across Africa, leaders jail reforms and later steal their policies. Kanu's story is part of a continental leadership failure where truth is punished first and copied what? Later. If Nnamdi Kanu was wrong, why is the government now enforcing his exact solution? And if he was right, what justification is left for keeping him in detention? That is the question we should be asking. Honestly, that is what the question we should be asking. Now, Nigeria did not just ignore Kanu, they stole his policy, they now rebranded it and are now selling it as their own national security plan. You cannot call a man a terrorist for demanding a policy, then adopt that same policy and expect the world to take you seriously. That is national hypocrisy on display. Around the world, whistleblowers expose threats and are punished, only for government to later admit they were right. Kanu is Nigeria's whistleblower and open grazing. Open grazing drove thousands from rural areas to overcrowded cities. Kanu's fight was also about saving rural life and preventing mass displacement. Every time the states want to silence a voice, they hide behind national security. Yet the real security came from the same policy they jailed him for promoting. Now, Southeast silence now is complicity. If they won't speak why Kanu's words are proven right, history will record their betrayal. Open grazing isn't just cows and farm, it's a question of sovereignty. Kanu was defending the right of communities to control their land. Let's compare this to other African activists. From Temo Sankara to Steve Biko, African visionaries are often punished for truth. Kanu joins a long line of voice silenced before being proved right. Now, let's link it to modern economy. Modern economies don't run on nomadic grazing. Kanu wasn't inciting. He was demanding Nigeria move into the 21st century century. So let's use who's the criminal. This is the question. If the government now agrees open grazing is a threat, then who is the criminal? The man who warned about it or the ones who ignored him? Let's address the fear of admitting wrong. Keeping Kanu locked up is not about justice. It's about the government's fear of admitting they were wrong for 4 years. Show the Southeast sacrifice. Kanu sacrificed his freedom to protect the Southeast. Now the entire nation benefits from his warning while he remains what? Chained. One day, Nigeria will have to apologize and compensate Kanu for the years stolen from him, or for the years stolen from him for speaking the truth. A pride nation doesn't jail its visionaries. A broke one does. Where does Nigeria stand in this story? You can free him now or later, but you can't erase the truth. Nnamdi Kanu was right. The question is, how long will Nigeria keep punishing the truth? That is just it. That is just it. They will keep punishing the truth. Anyway, guys, I want you guys actually please drop your comment below. Just like I told you guys, this is a ritual we always do here in this channel. Please always comment in this thing. Always comment free Nnamdi Kanu, and also justice delayed is not justice denied, because I'm actually using this platform, to agitate for the release and for the freedom of Nnamdi Kanu, because he is an innocent man. So guys, I want you guys to drop your comment below, because we will be talking about it, and I'll also be back to analyze the reason why Tinubu now decided to end open grazing in Nigeria. And meanwhile, before that, please, I want you guys to take a look at this video and watch what the lawyer of Nnamdi Kanu, Maxwell, but I have to say about Nnamdi Kanu and also what Tinubu is doing in Nigeria. Guys, please watch this and drop a comment below. And
calm down. The reason Nnamdi Kanu, have a discussion with him. You have been having a discussion with bandits and the so-called repentant Boko Haram. Tell me the offense of Nnamdi Kanu, because he's agitating for self-determination, which is his own constitutional fundamental rights granted to him by the Constitution and the law.
Well, the government's anger is not because of the agitation, because they know that everyone has a right to agitate. But they said the way he was going about it, like and then people were being incited. Well, that's even not what I'm
What of the one the wife of the president incited people during the election? The wife of the president, he incited people that Igbo should go. What of the one Oba of Lagos said that Igbo should go and fall into lagoon? What of those that came out and said that Igbos will not vote? If you are not voting for APC, you will not vote. What happened to them? Has anybody been arrested? That Nnamdi Kanu said something, then you now term that thing he said as is a terrorist, is a crime of terrorism. You charge him for terrorism. His own lawful organization that is registered in almost all the whole countries in America and Europe and Asia, and you now came to Nigeria, you term it a terrorist organization. Now you are now saying that now that IPOB is being recognized in almost all the whole countries, America and Europe. So you are now saying that America, France, Germany, they are recognizing a terrorist organization because you don't want anybody to agitate. You want to suppress anybody. If you talk, kill him, suppress him, jail him. In a country that is predicated on constitutional governance, it cannot work like that.
Okay, let's get back to the ministerial nomination of Bianca Ojukwu, because you said he took away one from Anambra and brought in another. But remember that the president took away the minister based on the KPI results that came out, which he was not even the one, that did the evaluation. It was the result given to him, with which he did that, meaning that if actually the minister had performed, above board in the KPI, he wouldn't have had any reason to remove her rather.
Now, still on that ministerial list, we have 48 of them, am I right? And we have 36 states in this country, including FCT 37. So apart from Southeast, that have only 5, every other region have more than 6, apart from Southeast. Now, check since 1999, we have been having series of presidents. Let's use what is going on now. The president is from where? Vice is from where? Speaker is from where? Senate President is from where? CJN is from where? Court of Appeal President is from where? National Industrial Court President is from where? Chief Judge of Federal High Court is from where? And they are saying that the people of Southeast belongs to this country.
The chief of
are you sure Max, are you sure you're not? I mean, it's just like what I said too. I mean, isn't it time we started to be less sentimental about this diversity?
We have to apply it now. We are saying that the only people that are qualified to hold this position, nobody from South is qualified. On what basis?
Are you saying that
the chief of Naval Staff is from the Southeast? Huh? The chief of Naval Staff?
From where? I'm talking about the key position. Number 1 person, number 2 person, number 3 person, number 4 person, number 5 person. The key position, we have 3 arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the parliament. You can never see anybody from Southeast there. Now, the point we are talking about is that when I'm not even talking about, I'm in court about lopsided appointments.
Okay.
I can avail that my process because I did an intensive research in that process. File it, asking court to view whether this particular appointment, whether this particular governance is in line with Federal Character Establishment Act, an act of National Assembly that said that you should carry everybody along. Section 14 of the Constitution also said that you should carry everybody along. And they are not doing all these things. You are telling me that, yes, now that you have removed Kennedy Hanele and they are now brought in Jan Kojuku, that the people of Southeast will jubilate. Are you talking to idiots? Look at the people that you are talking about. Let me start with the source. In football, the people that have made Nigeria proud are the people of Southeast. In commerce, in aviation industry, name it. In academics, they are from people of Southeast. But when it comes to power, they are not qualified. And we want them to be happy. Listen, let me tell you, like today that is Monday, go to Southeast. And my annoyance is that these things are avoidable for Christ's sake. The one at Niger, the reason and the Kanu, let us start addressing this issue. This early morning, somebody sent me a clip, something they posted, that they said from, I think they said next week, maybe the next 2 weeks, that there will be nothing like federal courts in the whole of Southeast. What do I mean by federal courts? Federal courts, National Industrial Court is a federal court. Federal High Court is a federal court. Court of Appeal is a federal court. Now, the judges that are there, most of them are not Igbos. Majority of them are not Igbos. How should you risk somebody to go and preside in the Court of Appeal over the judicial division, Oka Judicial Division, Enugu Judicial Division? How can you appoint somebody to go and preside in Federal High Court in the Southeast, National Industrial Court in the Southeast? And we are not even thinking about all this, and the judges are not even thinking about So the point we are talking about is that when there is a problem, look for a solution. Personally, somebody like us, we are not even, I'm defending Nnamdi, one of his lawyers. So when they say so you people are not doing what you're supposed to do, the person that is calling you, don't even know him. He's using a hidden number to call you. You don't even know what they're talking about. The only thing that you want to court and you were unable to bring Nnamdi out. They're not even safe.
Okay, Maxwell, let me ask you this, because from what you're saying, I've also heard IPOB many times deny, allegations of being involved in some of the killings that happen in the Southeast and some of the, the ills that we see in the society. Even the sit-at-home in question, IPOB has also claimed that he has not asked anybody to sit at home. I don't know, get my point. So the point I'm making is that from what you're saying, it would look as if what you're actually trying to say is that it's because Nnamdi is being held,
yes,
that is why the ills in the society in the Southeast has escalated. Does it have anything to do with him? That is what you're saying.
Do you know why? Nnamdi Kanu, IPOB is his initiative. He established it, he organized it. Now, when you now kidnapped him or adopted him, and unlawfully, because the Supreme Court have said that he was unlawfully brought into this country, and you kept him incommunicado, everybody on his own. This one we kill, you said at IPOB. This one we maim, you said at IPOB. Everybody on his own. That's why I asked you the question, who is IPOB? The IPOB is Nnamdi Kanu. So Nnamdi Kanu, if Nnamdi Kanu is out, he will know who is who. Simon Ekpa will talk his own, Emma Powerful will talk his own, this one will talk his own, this one. Who is IPOB? That you are even talking. Simon Ekpa is in Finland. Emma Powerful, I don't know where he's operating from. Another person is operating from somewhere. Issuing threats. Just like the one somebody told me. I don't even know where that one is coming from. So the easiest way to do is the one that you know. Nnamdi Kanu. Then tell Attorney General, as he discontinue the charges against the president of Mieti Ala Kato, discontinue that of Showore, they are all terrorism. Tell them to discontinue that of Nnamdi Kanu, and allow Nnamdi Kanu to agitate. It is his right. I told you the other day.
You see, that's where the problem is, really. The guarantee, that there will not be problems, even if Nnamdi Kanu is, because you're saying allow him to agitate, and he goes about it the way he used to, like, the government have actually feared. That may also create more problems, don't you think?
Let me tell you, there are some things that you asked me the other day whether they are talking about condition given Nnamdi Kanu. I told you one question. I say, if you give Nnamdi Kanu condition that he feel after meeting up that condition, he will still live like a human being, so be it. But when you give him condition and you are removing that made him a human being, he will tell you no. What is that made you a human being? That thing that makes you a human being is your ability to exercise your fundamental rights. And when somebody said, now I'm going to employ you here, I'll be paying you $500,000 every month, but you will not talk. You will not move out. You said, do away with your job. When somebody said, I'm going to release you, but I'll cut one of your hands. Say no. The agitation for self-determination is a fundamental right. And if you people fail to understand it, I can agitate that I need the Republic of Maxwell. Yeah. It is my right. Anybody can agitate. I don't even need people, crowd to follow me. It is when you now feel that you have gotten the necessary, the necessary, need the necessary qualities, then so be it. It is now left for the president who believe in democracy, who believe in government of the people by the people, to apply an initiative. What is the initiative? Release the person. Start addressing all those issues that gave rise to this agitation. It has been there. Uwazirike was agitating during Obasanjo. A lot of people were agitating. So now that you have arrested, you come down Uwazirike that time. Nnamdi Kanu came up. Now that you have arrested Nnamdi Kanu, Simon Ekpa is there. I think this data from Ned Nwoko was telling you that even if you arrest Simon Ekpa today, another Simon Ekpa will come out. So the issue there is that address all those issues.
Right. So for you, it's not about ministerial appointment.
No. That one.
Okay,
that is the complete distraction. It
shouldn't even come in.
Okay. After turning in now, let Bianca come and address the Igbos in Enugu.
All right.
So my you guys have listened to what the lawyer of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu says, right? Where he was saying that you cannot give somebody a condition. If you give someone a condition, and that condition means like you trying to, you trying to cage him, he's not going to accept that condition. He will not. He's not going to accept that condition. If you're giving conditions that, you give him this condition, and the main purpose of giving him that condition is to cage him, just like the fact they say that if the Mazi Nnamdi Kanu wants to be released, they should he should drop his international passport, he should renounce Biafra. All these conditions you're giving him. After giving him the conditions, is he still going to remain a human being? After taking all these things, instead they will not say, okay, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu will even say, let's forget about let's forget about it. Yes, let's forget about it. Instead, let them release me legally. Let me be released legally, because I know I did not commit any offense. That is just it. Anyway, guys, just like I used to tell you guys, there's a ritual we normally do here. This platform is used to agitate for the freedom and the release of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. So please, I want you guys to type in the comment section, free Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, and also say justice delayed is not justice denied, because we actually use this platform to agitate for his release, to advocate for the freedom of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. So guys, that's what we have for today. Let me know your thoughts below, and also if you know you're new to this channel, please don't forget to click the subscribe button, like and turn on the notification button to get all the latest news in this channel. So guys, thanks for watching, and see you guys again in my next live session. And also don't forget that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu will be coming to court on October 10, 2025, and this platform I'll be telling you guys everything concerning Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. This we'll be talking about Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's what the Nigerian government are doing to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. That is just everything you guys will be getting. That's if you click the subscribe button to getting all the latest news in this channel. So guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys again in my next live section.